Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rochelle Clark, and I'm with a company called CollabNet. And today we want to talk a little bit about DevOps, specifically DevOps Lifecycle Management. Our panel for today includes Diego Logidice, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We also have Eric Robertson, Vice President, Product Management and Engineering with CollabNet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the two of you for joining us today. So we're going to kick things off with Diego. All yours.
Thank you, Rochelle, and thanks to CollabNet for giving me the opportunity to share some of my research in the space of Agile plus DevOps, I call it these days. And so let's get directly into the topic here, which is becoming a key topic for lots of end users and in the industry. But let me take a little bit of a step back, because I always like to give a context to why we talk about Agile and DevOps and why do we have to care. And the point is really that digital is everywhere, digital disruption, digital transformation. There is no client that I work with that is not in some sort of form of digital transformation. And actually, you don't have to take my word for it, but you can look at the data. This data shows that no industry is actually immune from digital disruption. Even the most technical, scientific industries, or less innovative sometimes, like industrial products or construction and engineering, at the question, is digital disrupting your market, or has it disrupted your market already? You can see that 59, 67% of them respond yes. That's way higher than 50%, and it goes all the way up to 94% when you go into industries like healthcare, which is one of the top industries being disrupted today. Disrupted by, startups and new business models that we're all seeing in the market. So the point is that you can be in one of these industries, and it means that with different levels of aggressiveness, you're going to be disrupted. And so what does that have to do with software development and software? Well, what is it that makes a business digital? It's the software, it's the applications, it's the modern applications that we build every day to get new clients and to acquire new clients and to serve our existing clients. And so if that's digital disrupting all industries, it's software that makes a digital business successful, then we really have to become excellent. Doesn't matter if you're a bank or if you're a technical engineering company, a manufacturing company, you have to become excellent at designing, developing, composing, testing, and deploying software, the whole life cycle. So it becomes a key business process. Building and delivering software becomes a key business process. And so that means also that we have to do what we do with typical business processes, which is we like to measure things. We like to see exactly what's going on at any stage of the process, which is a little bit the topic of our webinar today. And so the next question is, what's the best thing out there to be able to deliver excellence, to deliver excellence, but also to have an excellent delivery? Well, it is Agile, and we've been talking about Agile now for the last 10, 13 years. In the last 3, 4, it's really become, more than 50% of the organizations that I talk to have adopted Agile. But recently, DevOps has been heating up too. And I actually see Agile and DevOps two sides of the same coin. You can't do one without the other, really. Companies that have been doing Agile have been doing some sort of DevOps, but without necessarily maybe having a huge transformation going on the operations side. And we just realized that in enterprises that doesn't work. And so DevOps is a great thing for Agile. So I don't buy all the conversations around DevOps suppressing Agile, or is it an Agile 2.0? Well, if you're doing Agile right, you're doing the right thing. DevOps done right is going to just improve further the whole transformation that you're going through to have an excellent delivery process. And I do in Forrester a panel. I run a panel of Agile every 2 years, and by the way, this year 2017 is going to be the new panel that I'm going to run in a couple of months. And one of the benefits, and that panel is made of companies that are in an agile journey. Right? It's not about asking the question if companies are doing agile, but it's about how are you doing agile, because that's the question we need to ask, and what are the benefits. And one of the key benefits out of the many that I get back and I like to highlight for the purpose of this webinar is business and IT alignment. But there are two things. There's another thing that I want to highlight, which is, yes, that's the top benefit, but the great thing about these numbers is that with Agile, what happens is it's that the expected benefit is quite close to the actual achieved benefit, which doesn't happen always when we have a new paradigm. And the other aspect is, of course, this business alignment, which means that Agile really does tear down the wall between business and development. And that's a very key thing that I want to focus on for the purpose of our webinar today. And then we have DevOps that really does complete what Agile has started. And you can see that when we talk about DevOps, what we look at, one way to measure how much DevOps is being done in an organization, or how DevOps an organization is the release frequency. And we can see that release frequency in the last 2 years, this is the data from 2016, but if you compare to 2015, here you can see that about 36% of the organizations release software at least once a month. That's pretty interesting. It's up 3% from 2015. It's not a huge leap forward, but it shows that it can be done. These are large, medium enterprises. We work with 1,000 Fortune companies and all enterprises that are 1 billion and above. And the other thing is also build frequency. You can see that teams are starting to make a build at least once a day. So there's lots of automation going on here. And so that's why DevOps is really attractive too. And so Agile plus DevOps together, what they do, so DevOps tears down the wall between development and operations. So Agile helps tear down the wall between business and development. DevOps completes the tearing down of walls between ops, dev, and even testing as well. I would say Agile does Agile contributes. For doing Agile properly, you also need to tear down the wall with testing. We talk a lot about Agile testing, and we've learned a lot in that space. So this is what DevOps looks like to a business person at a high level. It's really a process that gets developers very close to exactly what users want when they're using what's developed by the developers themselves. So going from ideation to build to test to release to monitor becomes a very short cycle, and that happens on a pipeline, on a delivery pipeline. So it's like having, Agile gives you the Ferrari, the nice Ferrari to drive, and DevOps gives you the freeway on which you can run the Ferrari. And each development team will have its own delivery pipeline, so that now things can move much faster. And the other important thing that DevOps brings, among many others, that for the purpose of this conversation today, I want to highlight, is that feedback with data analytics, feedback loop. DevOps really closes the last mile, and it allows you to now automatically leverage production data, lots of analytics, to feed that back into the loop and make sure that when we're building things, we're building things based on the feedback that we're getting from the users, rather than having just a business analyst who is interpreting what their needs is, right? And that's a big quality improvement for delivery. And so feedback loop is important, and DevOps really does that well. And why is it essential? Well, exactly for the purpose that I was just explaining, which is, if you're using, the traditional requirements management approach, this is an example from Microsoft, from the Bing team. They did a large-scale study to find out that in a traditional requirements process, 1/3 of the ideas improved the metric that they set as a goal. 1/3 of the ideas had no effect on targeted metric, and 1/3 of the ideas actually decreased the target metric. So it was even, basically not improving. So in other words, we build a lot of code with a traditional approach that is sometimes unnecessary and not used. That's the end result. And it's because of that the feedback model. It's because of that feedback loop that is not working, that is not being leveraged. So a little bit more technically, DevOps in the perfect world looks like this. There's lots of steps. There's different stakeholders that are working on a pipeline together, starting from customer experience folks who are helping and working with the business or product owner and QA folks, pulling together the idea, and then from that the epic, and then from the epic maybe the user story, creating the backlog. Developers are starting to pull user stories and starting designing and developing and building code and integrating the code into an integration server. Someone in the meantime is preparing or is delivering a pipeline on which the software delivery process will be run on. That is infrastructure as code, typically referred as. And then we start with some testing activities like unit testing that developers need to do, static code analysis, peer code reviews, merging software into a big trunk, especially if it's at the enterprise level. Integration issues are something that we need to deal with. And so there's an important integration step. And there is integration testing, automation done. There is also preparing the release preparing the release in an automated way with all other related testing activities like functional testing, non-functional testing. All this testing, by the way, has to happen in an automated way in a delivery pipeline. And so, but there's also some manual testing, of course, happening because not everything entirely gets automated. And last but not least, one of the important steps is also that analytics and that we talked about for leveraging metrics to find out exactly what's going on in the delivery pipeline. I'll come back to that in a minute. So there's a lot of orchestration going on. There's lots of different roles that are collaborating around the pipeline, and there's quite a complex tool chain that we will see in a minute that this needs. So the question is then, how do we actually do this, right? If I'm an enterprise, how am I going to do this? Well, there's the list is actually, the steps are more than 5, but I just wanted to highlight these 5 points that I think are quite crucial and contextual to the topic of the conversation we're having today. The first thing is lean. Lean at the strategic level is an important concept, and the principles of lean are an important concept that business people understand, that your executives will understand. Things like focus on creating value for the business. Things like, or principles like eliminate waste, or continuous improvement, respect for people, excellence. You can actually, as an enterprise, look through the principles of lean and decide which are the right ones that you want to highlight on, because it depends also where you are in your own journey of becoming more leaner. And then there are some specific practices like the minimum viable product. That is, the lean startup Eric Race has been talking a lot about, which helps us look at building a product in smaller chunks. And you'll see why that's important, because it helps us build smaller releases and deliver them faster with less complexity and more quality. And this build, measure, learn, quick, fast loop with business involved, minimizing work in progress. So there's a whole bunch of new practices. These all are around lean. And the great thing is that lean matches nicely into the agile values and principles, but it's also underpinning the principles of DevOps. So it's a common set of values and principles for both disciplines. And so agile plus DevOps, really with lean, lean is kind of feeding both of those approaches. And it's really a lot about these modern software factory practices that have been used in manufacturing. When we talk about a continuous delivery pipeline, we actually look at it as a supply chain process where you can automate a lot in that chain, and where you can measure things and have visibility in the pipeline. So Just to give you a little bit more of an idea now how this might apply in the world of software, this is a typical process, quite traditional, I would say, not too agile, but idea proposed, understanding needs of a solution, developing, committing, build, running some testing. Actually, here we've even parallelized some of it, even though it doesn't always happen in the traditional world of software development, making a release decision, deploying a solution, and customer value. If you look at all those steps, there is a lot of bottlenecks, and the bottlenecks are lack of effective customer insight. Well, we didn't have that feedback loop that we were talking about. Too much work in progress. It's proven in the lean world that if work is like hanging around and not being completed or not being executed, it's bringing in poor quality. It's introducing quality issues in the product that we're working on. So work in progress. It's really important to have working process to be as optimized as possible. Manual build and integration process. Some organizations even do manual builds. I mean, it's amazing, but it still happens. But even integration done in a manual way. Testing done all manually rather than being automated. Making a good candidate release. Well, if you're doing manual testing, of course, the only way you can propose a good release is having people sitting around the table and deciding if that release is good to be deployed. It can be deployed. And then a manual approach even in deploying the software. And then there's, of course, in all these, there's handovers, and there's a lot of error when you do handovers, and that's basically, known waste. This is just a summary of many of the things that I mentioned to be waste in a delivery process. Processes that you don't need, features that are the wrong features being built, switching tasks. We used to encourage our people to work on multiple projects in parallel. Well, that's very inefficient. Switching between tasks is proven to be something that introduces, again, a lot of waste and time wasted because you have to regain the context for what you were doing. Wait time, if there are handovers, defects, heroic moments for pushing a big delivery out to production over the weekend. Those are all things that can be fixed and should be fixed. And so there is a way to do that, which is using value stream mapping. And in this research of the Modern Application Delivery Playbook that I write a lot about, I actually, this is a figure coming out of that research. And you can see that the similar process that we just saw in the previous slide here, I'm applying some value stream management, some value stream mapping concepts. And it's a lean practice. And what I'm doing is, if I measure starting from when I get a customer request all the way to value delivered to the customer, step by step, I look at what the process time is to, for example, submit an idea. It might take 2 hours to formalize the idea and submit it, but it might take a day to actually get that idea to the next step before someone picks it up and starts working on it. So we call that lead time and process time. Lead time includes the waste. Process time is the actual time it would take to do the job. If you do a Gemba walk, as we say in Lean, in your real process of how software is delivered, not what's written on the books, but it's what people are actually doing every day, right, as they are working in this process, you might find out that a process like this takes, and these are just arbitrary numbers, a lead time of 123 days versus a process time of 39. So in other words, to really do the work, it would take 39 days, but it's taking us 123 days. And that's a real eye-opener for executives. They will start understanding quickly, okay, we need to do something about this. So they will start listening to Agile and DevOps, because Agile and DevOps will allow us, will enable us not only to find out through value stream mapping where the impediments are, pulling them out, but actually then automating some of them too, and increasing, and therefore decreasing time for delivery. Now, it's not just about process. Process is important, but architecture is also key. And yes, we do have, old applications running on mainframes, and we've been kind of focusing Agile mostly on the front ends, or what we call systems of engagement. But if you look at the systems, the back-end systems of record, we hit the wall once we keep modernizing only on the front end because the back end is not supporting anymore with the right data, or maybe not with the time it takes to actually to get something to build a new service from old legacy code, or from an architecture that's very siloed. And this is just an example of Amazon that 5 years ago completely rewrote their whole portal, business e-commerce portal with web services. It actually was a mandate by Bezos that every new piece of code that was written would have a web service, would have to have a web service. That was the mandate for all developers in the company. And of course, above that, you need to have some service design capabilities and make sure that you're designing the right services and exposing the right services. But basically, it means that we really have to adopt microservice, containers, and cloud, I would say, to bring flexibility into the back end. Do we have to rewrite everything? No. We can have a wrapping strategy. Some things might need to be rewritten. Some things can be containerized to become more flexibly managed and ported over to the cloud. The other important piece, so architecture, process. From a process perspective, the nice thing about DevOps is that we can now automate governance. So it's not that we don't have governance and that everything is just arbitrary. No, we've got rules, but we automate those rules. We can automate those processes, which are pretty standard. And there are a lot of control points in that process that we showed for continuous integration, continuous delivery, like the one that I just mentioned, release automation, that when people have to sit down to decide if a release is a good candidate release, but actually if you're automating your tests, that decision on the release can be done automatically, because now you can put a gate check and say, well, if 80% of all the tests passed, this is a great release, or you can add some more in the workflow. So the point is we're bringing in also an automation, not just for testing and not just for building the code, but actually we're automating governance. And that's what DevOps is also bringing to the table. And the last point is around metrics. What do we measure? Well, there's lots of things that we can measure along the pipeline, right? What is the basic code integrity, the buildability of code, component integrity, code quality and code security, environment drifts, the environment's aligned with the business line, with the business environment, the release success, failure, fitness for purpose, how far is what's delivered to what we actually required, release success and cycle time, and then all the way up to customer experience. But the real thing that business wants is what's the value that's being delivered. And we talk much more about value these days than we did in the past, where most of the focus was just on productivity. So quality, productivity are all great metrics and things that we still need to measure, but we need to add the value equation to the whole thing. So in a pipeline, there's the various stakeholders, as you will see in a minute, all have a stake in the ground and want to see more. So that the mention around analytics and using, for example, production data will allow us to do things like this. So in other words, we could look at what features are actually used in production, either by instrumenting the code or using all the great monitoring tools and web tools that are provided today. And for apps on mobile, we can actually see exactly which features are used and how many of them are used. And if you compare that to the data that you might have on application features tested, if the intersection of those two things is 35%, which you might be surprised that might happen quite frequently, there's a problem here, because there's, either we're delivering the wrong features in production or we're not testing enough. Likelihood is that maybe, both things are happening. And so with that data point, we can go back and review maybe that we are testing even too much, or we're testing the wrong things, or actually we're implementing the wrong requirements. We can even go back and check our requirements. And so analytics are becoming more and more important in the overall measurement world. And during the pipeline, if you remember, we mentioned lots of stakeholders, but look at the product owners and the business folks. We have to give them answers like, what's the value of the epic that's being delivered? What's the cycle time for the epic to be delivered? What's the release cost run rate? You know, how am I doing with my budget? And what's the cost of the feature that was just delivered? The developers are interested in being able to inspect their epics, the stories, where the code is, how the code, you know, what the quality of the code is, in which image maybe would that code end up, and the ops folks, you know, more interested in understanding how the code is being deployed and the traceability going all the way back to requirements and epics, and the QA folks, the quality. And there's more questions and there's more visibility that needs to be provided to the in a continuous delivery pipeline in DevOps, with all the stakeholders having a stake in the ground in it. And the last point is, I did a research this summer around the technology radar for continuous software delivery, and this is coming back to if you remember that big loop that we showed earlier, the chain of tools that I mentioned. There's 17 different types of tool categories that are contributing to a continuous delivery chain, and that's because there hasn't been a lot of consolidation, and it's starting, but it's still far from being where it needs to be. And a lot of the tools are in some areas doing the same things that other tools are doing, so there's lots of overlap as well. But in this Tech Radar, we looked at the different technologies and which are the ones that are more successful on the success adoption rate versus the lower moderate success of adoption and minimal success of adoption. And I just want to mention this. You can see that all the 7, 8 testing categories of tools are on the Tech Radar, but there is one category which we called value stream management, which are the tools that are kind of in a formation phase, that are down here in the creation phase, meaning that we haven't yet really, these are not mature. This is because DevOps is getting into the market. This is the year of DevOps perhaps, and more tools are being deployed, and more continuous delivery and software is being delivered through continuous delivery pipelines. We're getting to the point where we do need to provide to those stakeholders exactly what's the value delivered and information around the pipeline itself, the health of the pipeline as the health of the actual code. Basically what we were doing with ALM when ALM was around, right? I say was around, it's not dead, but it's been extended now, right? And so I think value stream management is really the new ALM of continuous delivery pipelines. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric. And I thank you all for your attention. And here you go, Eric.
Thanks, Diego. Appreciate that. So I would like, thank you. So I would like to continue the great discussion that Diego started with the DevOps value stream and that topic around that. And I would like to focus on our differentiation on how we leverage your DevOps tool chains, because Diego talked about the complexity around that as well, and mapping them to the value streams that can be monitored and measured to deliver that fast feedback that Diego referenced and to drive continuous improvement. Okay. So a little bit about CollabNet. So CollabNet was founded in 1999, so we've been around. And it's really truly one of the founding fathers of the open source movement. And today, thousands of customers rely upon our solutions to develop high-quality software at speed. And we maintain a global presence with offices in San Francisco, Houston, which I'm based out of, London, Berlin, Chennai, and Tokyo. And we also, our leaders run their enterprises on our software. And if you look at the slide here, you'll see that we have customers that are across multiple verticals and industries. And some of the top areas, like in the financials, the technologies, the government, and even in the top consumer product arena and service-based companies as well. So I'd like to continue on with what Diego left off with, the measurement aspect. And as it was excellently articulated by Diego, at CollabNet, we believe that the missing ingredient also in this DevOps area is really around measurement. And without the ability to integrate into the many tools within DevOps, into your DevOps tool chain, the ability to analyze and associate the hundreds and sometimes thousands of events that you'll see, and report on these findings, and finally measure the value of an organization is receiving from these tools, DevOps would be rendered more hype than actual value. And so it really is incumbent for companies to measure or evaluate. We'll see. So, as you know, high-quality software is the result of the work of many team members who are dependent on each other's work. And without really understanding these relationships, the gaps can go unnoticed. And teams may focus on less important areas, and decisions are made with little insight on the impact, which all lead to that poor quality, right? And as organizations seek to put together tool chains to support their DevOps processes for delivering quality value software to their customers, their end users, they deal with many issues. And generally, tool chains solve specific issues in a silo type of world, but they don't provide good view, feedback, or consistent value stream health measurement across these different disparate tools. Nor do they understand the bottlenecks that Diego referenced, which impact cycle time and quality. And CollabNet DLM, DevOps Lifecycle Manager, provides the value stream monitoring and manageability across the three major enablers here. First one is DevOps toolchain integration, and that's really about connecting that information flow between these disparate tools and teams across your value streams from planning through live to production. Next is the DevOps toolchain orchestration, and this is really what Diego talked about as far as being can now imply and bring in automation into the fold here. And so what we're talking about is coordinating these activities across these tool chains. And the automation can not only be for notification, but they can also be for remediation, diagnostic, all which is used to drive fast feedback from that planning through live production and even back to the planning cycle. And the last is the DevOps insight and intelligence. And this is where the tool chains are mapped into the value streams and are managed in line with what Diego referenced around business priorities, right? So KPIs and metrics are used to identify those bottlenecks and delays, as well as areas where effort, cost, and time can be saved. So let's take a look at this and see how the mapping of DevOps tool chains to value streams, how we look upon that. So we have the DevOps lifecycle that's mapped across phases. And in this example here, we have a plan to operations, and the DevOps tool chains generate a series of events that take a product or service from its beginning through to its customer. Now, these events are measured and mapped to value chains, as you see here, which are mapped to value streams. So for value stream number one, that could be an application, it could be a project, services, microservices like Diego referenced here. But the important point is that we have a tool chain of events that follow a flow, a process, that we can actually measure that process, right? And by collecting the events, we can now identify relevant metadata that links the core data back to the tool. In other words, we're not just synchronizing data through this flow. What we're doing is we're correlating and mapping relevant events to this value stream. In this case, we have value stream one, so we have, for example, like a JIRA, TFS, Urban Code, SonarQube map, and is utilizing Splunk and ServiceNow. We may have another value stream that using different tools from the planning, coding, building, and testing, but it may be leveraging same tools for the monitoring and operations. That's actually a different flow. What's happening is they're generating different events, and so it's very important that from a value stream standpoint that we measure the relevant events that are unique to each value stream. Okay, so let's see how we measure and provide that fast continuous feedback. So what we do is we start off by mapping with the plan where you see here is mapped to a set of activities. Now what's key is that we have an abstracted integration layer, is where we have schemas that are aligned to the activities that you see. So this allows DLM to be able to extract from the specific tool and map the activity. So in this case, we have an epic mapped to a story, mapped to a task. We can link it to the coding phase of that, so we can map to your commits, to any code reviews that you do. We're going to map to the build cycle, and we can link that to the test as well. So what's nice is we can actually see very quickly which tests are being done for what user stories, which developers are attached to that, which code reviews were done with that, what type of builds was actually making that up. Almost kind of a BOM, a bill of materials that you're going into the test cycle. This same type of BOM can also be leveraged when we start going up the value chain here. So actually what we're linking to now is the release and deploy type of activities. So if you have a release package, which essentially could be that BOM, could be deployed. You may have a series of tools that may be doing security or compliance type checks. So you can link that data in as well. And then it's the monitoring aspect. So I want to be able to bring in monitoring and metrics from the health events that are being generated. Now, what's nice is this doesn't necessarily have to be a production. I can actually start generating these events and capturing this data from different stages within my life cycle. So it may be within stage, maybe within test, maybe within QA. But what's relevant is that's information that could be fed back before it's even introduced into production. And then I have the operational side of the house. So this is where I'm linking in to not only your traditional service desk tools, like your ServiceNow or your Sharewell or your Jira Service Desk, but also linking into chat-up tools. A lot of organizations, especially site reliability and team engineers, they're utilizing chat-up type tools that allow them to capture information. All of this is very relevant in driving back information and data that's feeding back into that planning cycle and giving that information back to dev. So this is the linkage of the dev and the ops together and providing that continuous measuring and feedback across your DevOps value streams. Okay? So if we look at it from the standpoint of the platform, what we're delivering here, to really enabling that value stream monitoring and measuring across the DevOps tool chain, the DLM, the DevOps Lifecycle Manager, is a platform designed to plug right into your existing tools. That is really key and very core whenever we're talking with customers. They don't want to swap out their tools or map to a specific type of tool chain that you're dictating to them. They already have this in place. They want to leverage, and they want to quickly understand the value and linkage very quickly. So what we do is that we have the event traceability and correlation is next after the integration. And this event traceability and correlation is actually patent pending technology, which allows us very uniquely in industry to link this together. And a rules designer gives the ability to define and react to certain events rather than to invoke into another tool chain type of action. So not only we're communicating, allowing two different tools to be able to communicate with each other and automate activities, we're able to do that even outside of that realm as well. And lastly is the ability to identify key KPIs and deliver meaningful dashboards, whether you're in dev or operations side of that DevOps value stream. And that platform that we have is very, again, it fits into your environment and leverages enterprise type of capabilities that you're all used to. So it's very extensible, scalable type of architecture, secure, flexible, transparent, and it's a hybrid cloud. So it could be deployed within on-premise, in the cloud, or even a hybrid type of architecture that you may have within your environment, and depending on how you're driving your processes and value streams within your environment. So let's do a quick walkthrough of the product key features and highlight them from that standpoint. So the first one is the value stream health status. So what's very key here is that you want to very quickly understand whether it's an application, it's a service, or a project, you want to understand the pipeline health of that, right, end to end. You want to be able to measure that and very quickly understand and identify any exceptions that could be causing bottlenecks to that, and to be able to quickly take action in the areas of interest here. I remember when I talked to a lot of different customers, and a lot of them would sometimes dread some of the Scrum type meetings because when they would walk in, they were asked, what is the status of this? And they have to either go ask multiple people to understand what's happening, or them themselves have to go through logs of information to try to put together and identify an overall state, right? So what we want to be able to deliver is give them like a command center so they could quickly go to and quickly understand what is going on in their environment end to end. So we also made it very easy to add and define your tool chain that make up your value stream. So very quickly, that's mapped to those different phases from your planning to the operations. I could drag and drop and configure the type of tools that are making up my tool chain in my environment and mapping that to my value stream, and to start monitoring and start seeing these key metrics immediately. You'll see that one of the things that we're doing is capturing these metrics, things like plan to deploy, mean time to recover. It gives you this information relevant according to your value stream that you're having here. Another key piece that I want to highlight that Diego talked about is that tool chain orchestration, or the ability to collect these events or these activities and be able to take actions. So we're able to apply rules engine to create business and mission critical KPIs. And you can define orchestration rules across your tools to drive processes. I talk to customers and allow them to say, hey, even though we're going through this DevOps transformation, I still have ITIL processes and governance that I need to take an account of. How can you help me automate that, right? So they like looking at this, at a tool set and a view like this, where very quickly they can identify those key rules that are driving their key ITIL processes, and more importantly, to go to Diego's point, how can I automate governance? And where can I have a common one place where I can see the rules that are being applied and get the state of that as well? The next piece is, this is what we call kind of the command center of my life cycle, right? So in here, I can very quickly, that's color coordinated, I can see from my planning to my operations a monitoring of the activities, and I could quickly identify the exceptions. So I can see the exceptions that are coming from my planning, my coding, my building, my test, my deploy, especially around security and governance and compliance type aspects, and your operations as well. So I can monitor and measure the events and data points created that are already mapped from that value stream that we saw on that previous page. And then we can measure and track across the life cycle from the planning to the ops. This is all done in the context of the tool itself. So very quickly, what I could do is I could come in and then I could select view the tool. So if I have an exception, let's say within Jenkins that I'm getting, I can actually drill down and go directly to that tool, right? So instead of having to find the tool, log in, I'm already taken to the place where that relevant information is. Again, accelerating the quickness and ability to identify issues and accelerate your time. The other piece of this, and this is very key, because we talked about the traceability, I can also see and understand and associate the trace events and activity points across. So I can understand the impact throughout the entire value stream. So if I understand that, let's say, for example, a deployment failed or a bill failed, I could quickly map that up to see, what are the relevant user stories or epics that are tied to this? Are they very critical and key? So I can start prioritizing, right? If I got multiple issues, I can start prioritizing and see which one I want to address, because I have that information and tied together that I could quickly link and do a quick impact analysis from that data. The other piece of that is, if I have these exceptions, I not only want to respond to them, but I may also want to remediate and have the information available to me so I can review. So in this case, for example, the last one here, we have an OpenShift pod which is stuck in like in a waiting state, and this is critical for our credit card service value stream that we have, and we see the source is coming from a Kubernetes, right? So what I could do is I could drill down in there, and I already have a rule set up that said if I see this specific type of exception, Kubernetes, and actually it was published, they have a set of best practices that says if I see particular type of alerts or particular type of errors or conditions, run these type of scripts or run these specific type of commands. With this tool, with DLM, you can automate that, right? So not only are you showing here that we automate that, we're actually showing what are the results that we're getting back from that, right? And do a comparison there, right? And given that information relevant to the particular stakeholder that's needed. The other piece of that is if I right-click on it, I could go, like I said, directly to the tool. So I can actually go directly and log in to that tool to understand that the automation step that I executed, what were the results of that, right? And I can also put, for example, before they given executed, I can be notified to even get permission to even execute that as well. Again, that's the automating the governance aspect and example that Diego talked about, right? So last piece is the DevOps analytics and reporting. And what's key here is that ability to monitor and optimize across your processes. So we're capturing key metrics like, for example, MTTR, so we can monitor the MTTR, so we can understand how long is it taking me from a remediation from a mean time to resolution from a cycle, and understand the outliers as well. I can look at things like development cycles to resolution, development cycles to resolution across in relationship to my commits. So, for example, my commits and my builds should be more of a one-to-one type of relationship, but it may not be, right? I can investigate it. Is that to the sophistication of the user story that may be done? Is there something that's me and put it in there from a rework standpoint that I need to take a look at, right? I can also link in my quality metrics as well, and my deployment and monitoring metrics can be attached to it as well. Again, a single pane of glass to help me understand what is happening in my environment from the metrics. What's also nice, and Diego mentioned, is that I can have sophisticated type of analytics. So I can understand how long is it taking me, how much time am I actually spending in dev? I'm spending in the QA cycle, the stage cycle, right? In the planning cycle. And what are some of the key KPIs that I might be interested in? Like on the planning side, I may be interested in planned work versus unplanned work, that rework, right? And actually set up metrics and setting up barriers to say, if I go beyond a specific type of range, I want to be alerted on it or trending on that, right? If I start seeing that a lot of rework is being entered in that process, I probably want to do a further investigation to find out what's going on there from that standpoint. Each one of these metrics could be drilled down so I could quickly identify outliers or critical path type of analysis that's being approached. And again, I have different metrics depending on the stage. Like dev may be interested in my commits and build relationship. QA, as if there's coverage. Stage, I may be very interested in understanding security, performance type incidents, type of information there. All of that could be leveraged and relayed back to dev, right? So a summary is really about that integration, measuring, understanding, optimize, so you can answer questions that Diego talked about, like different stakeholders, right? So instead of just saying I did 4 deployments today, great, what does that actually mean to the business, right? For the developer, at the last release, deployed on time, but why do I have increase in service desk tickets, right? And IT ops, I need to understand is there anything impacting this release without having to go through it and look through every tool to get their information. And for the engineers, before deployment, did it pass through all the quality gates? Is it going through, like Diego mentioned, is it going through too many quality gates? Do I need to repurpose that as well in order to automate my process and automate feedback back to engineering and dev? So really it's about providing that platform to allow you to understand and optimize the value of these tools that the customers use to accomplish the agility, quality, and the speed and software delivery that Diego and myself are talking about in this presentation. Okay? And that's the conclusion of my presentation.
That is wonderful. Thank you again to Eric Robertson and to Diego Logedice. We have a couple of extra minutes, guys. If you don't mind, I would love to take a couple of questions from our audience here. Diego, the first one looks like it's tailored a little bit more toward your topic of conversation. They're wanting to know, how long does it take to mature value stream mapping from out of the creation phase?
Yeah, so I think what they're referring to is the tech router that I showed, which shows the adoption and the maturity of the tools that allow to do value stream management. Being in the creation phase means that a big ecosystem around this hasn't developed yet, and that the technology is being also pulled together. So I think that it depends a lot on how much DevOps is really gaining traction in the market, which it is. And so if that happens, of course, we have to measure all this, because otherwise business is not going to sponsor or is not going to buy into the approach if they don't understand what's going on, if we don't tell them and we can't prove what value is being delivered. So I think it's a 12, 18 months, is aggressive, but it depends on the investments that vendors also put into this and the client interest, which I'm seeing increasing a lot this year. So.
Yeah. I would have to concur there with Diego. I mean, when we talk to customers, their number one requirement is they're being asked by the business to justify. They said, you purchase these tools, even from open source, there's still a cost factor there, but now you really have to justify that we're receiving the value of the investments that we already made.
Perfect. The next question is more around areas of focus, and specifically on the topic of measurement. Mm-hmm. How are you measuring security and compliance in this type of tool?
Yeah, so our whole mantra is about integrating and leveraging what customers have within their environment. So we integrate into a number of security and compliance type of tools. If they do not have a tool, then we have specific partners that we work with as well. But really it's about whatever that tool that they're utilizing, they may be from a security, may be looking at it from even on the dev side versus on the operations side, but it's integrating into the existing and leveraging their existing security tool that they have. I know Diego has been working with a couple of partners, like for example, that we use as well, like Sana.
Yep. So there's an extended, I think, aspect to security, which it comes with the vulnerability
yep.
issue, and yep. So companies like Sonatype, which provides a component, software composition repository and other functionality around it. What they're focusing on, or other companies like Black Duck, etc., JFrog, they all enable you to, they're enabling you to understand what your bill of materials is, right, of software. Yep. In other words, where the software is coming from, what license, what upgrade, if there is a better version of it, may be available for a developer during development time, but also understanding exactly what's in production, so that when a security breach is known around a piece of software, you can quickly go and replace it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, and again, in an automated way and not just manual, because there is no time for manual in this. So, yeah, security is definitely a big issue.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more. And Diego, I think this is a little bit more aligned with a comment you made in regards to ALM. This person would like to know, a little bit more about the transformation of ALM, and they asked specifically, is LAM still relevant?
Maybe the word is not. We've been talking about ALM for years, but well, basically, we're really looking. ALM, application lifecycle management, is a subset of this life cycle that we're looking at, because we're shifting more left towards the business. If you look at what's happening with Agile, we're giving the driver's seat to the product owner, who has to be from the business. That means he's the one that decides what goes into a sprint or a release in the product that's being built, right? And so that's happening on one side, and on the other side, we're going all the way down to deployment and involving operations. Agility is coming on the ops side, which with ALM wasn't happening. ALM was something just for development, right? Yeah. And so I think it's now a subset of the overall development, DevOps lifecycle management, or value stream management, however we will be calling this new world of continuous delivery, basically. So, yeah.
I concur.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, guys. We don't have time to get to all of the questions today, but I do appreciate those of you who have reached out with interest. I'm happy to help facilitate, for those of you who still have some additional inquiries, you can reach me directly at rclark@collab.net. So please do feel free to continue to reach out with your questions, and I can help follow back up with Diego or Eric to get some responses there. Thank you again so much, gentlemen, for being part of our panel today. This is definitely an intriguing topic, and we hope to hear more from the two of you about the future of DevOps coming up soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.